If we're looking for the essence of the meaning of a planet, and we're looking today at the recent discoveries, we can see what was going on at the time of the discovery of the planet and infer from that the meaning of the planet. The idea being this, that when our consciousness as a species is ready for the next journey, the next dimension of unfolding, there'll be a symbol of that. And we will symbolize our reaching into the cosmic mysteries, metaphorically speaking, by our reaching into the cosmic mysteries, astronomically speaking. So when we discover, for example, Uranus, that's the first of the more recent discoveries, we had only recently known about telescopes. This was the work of Galileo, and although, it's very likely that Galileo actually saw Uranus but didn't know what it was. It was suggested that Uranus crossed over Saturn, and Galileo inferred wrongly that that was a moon of Saturn. But when it was becoming clear when it became clear that Herschel discovered Uranus and named it as a planet, and it was all tested and tried and so on, if we actually sort of look at what was going on at that time, we get a real sense of the meaning associated with that planet, because our consciousness was unfolding through the zeitgeist, through the historical period. And what was going on in 1781 was the Industrial Revolution. This was huge. For thousands of years we'd been doing agricultural things, and all of a sudden we started the journey into industrialization. It was huge. It was the dawning of a new dimension of consciousness in humanity. And so Uranus has come to represent that discovery, scientific furtherment, new ideas in consciousness, sudden breakthroughs in inventiveness, all of these kind of qualities required to move from the agricultural age where you were tuning into the rhythms of nature to the age which was designed by inventiveness of mind, moving away from the natural rhythms towards the power of our species to think, and to think inventively, creatively. So Uranus was discovered at the time when the Industrial Revolution required that of the pioneers. A little bit later on, we discovered Neptune, and it could well have been also that the sighting of Neptune took place well beforehand, but it wasn't discovered to be a planet until it was looked for as a planet. And the reason we looked for it and very, very quickly discovered it, knowing that it must be there, the reason we did that was because we had worked out that it should be there. In other words, we'd imagined it and then saw it. It was imagined by the perturbations, the inconsistencies of the orbital smoothness of Uranus. Because Uranus didn't operate quite as smoothly as we'd expected, it was inferred that there must be a planet gravitationally affecting it. And so we were aware that that must be there by calculations. And then we looked, and it was there. And if you actually think about what Neptune is, it's that, isn't it? We dream the future of our lives in this imaginal, fairy story kind of way. We make it all up in our imagination, and then it comes to pass. This is how we create reality. It is by this Neptunian process of expecting to see something and then seeing it. Rather subtle, but beautiful, I find. Now, at that time, which was 1846, the first experiments were taking place in the use of anesthetics. Pretty much the same year. And Neptune represents our glamour, the clouding that we put between the cold, hard truth of reality and what we perceive it to be. We soften our sense of perception of reality with Neptune. Neptune is the lie we tell ourselves, the illusion, the delusion, the difference between the facts of the matter and what we believe. That's Neptune. And that's like anesthetics, isn't it? Like the pain is just too much for us to bear, so we soften it with anesthetics. And that's what we do with Neptune. So Neptune is a very softening influence that warps the truth so that we can actually take it, because the hard truth is just too much to bear. Now, Pluto was discovered in 1930, and at that time, historically, we were witnessing the birth of the growth of Nazism, and the power of tyranny and bullying on the highest scale we'd ever seen, and that ability that Pluto has to absolutely control someone or be controlled, that sense of domination and submission, that's inherent within the Pluto's operating principles. We also, at that time, discovered the neutron, which gave rise to nuclear physics, which gave us the nuclear bomb, and the ability, therefore, to self-destruct the planet. We learned in that period how to destroy ourselves. And ever since we have discovered that ability, we have lived in fear of the enemy in a way that was never the case before. And so Pluto has this ability to frighten and terrorize and self-destruct and destroy other people. Now, of course, that's not all that was going on. Pluto also has this ability of charisma. And you had the gangsters in Chicago, particularly Al Capone and all those people. And although they were terrible operators of the Pluto principle, they were also highly charismatic. And they introduced style into gangsterism. And made it kind of interesting, and we've got a lot of fiction based on that because it's just fun and funny and humorous and entertaining for us. So this whole thing of violence of Pluto being entertainment, I'm sure there was sex and violence in all the fiction beforehand, but in the current era, that's what the movies are about, sex and violence. So Pluto kind of brought our attention to this and started to make us use what had been discovered earlier in the time of Freud, sort of psychoanalysis. Even though it was discovered earlier, the ability to use psychoanalytical methods was made so much more obvious by Hitler than had ever been made before. There's this person called Edward Bernays, I think, something like that, Bernays, and he was a nephew of Sigmund Freud and used the psychological techniques of that great man, Freud, to create effects in ways which are a bit shady, like introducing popularity of women smoking by taking a picture of feminists smoking and identifying that the struggle for feminism and the ability that women had, the right they had to smoke cigarettes. This was advertising taking on a new and more sinister dimension at that time. And Hitler was so impressed with the ability of this new modern psychological technique called propaganda that he employed Bernays, that was his name, to do the same thing for the Nazi Party. And they came up with their logo and their color design, really effective, that red, black and white color design in the swastika is great marketing technique, albeit for a sinister purpose. So all of that was Pluto as well. Now we come into 1977, the discovery of Chiron, and what was going on at that time was that consciousness was moving into a more mature assimilation of what happened a decade earlier in the love generation. The hippies wanted there to be a change in consciousness, And it was seeded then, but it didn't actually become realized and realistic until certain occupations started to grow. The first was whole food shops, where you wanted to eat healthily. And then you had health practitioners, acupuncturists and massage practitioners and back flower remedies and all of these kind of New Age practitioners of health. And the whole New Age consciousness began with the discovery of Chiron. And Chiron's principle is to change perception, that the key to unlock your commitment to ill health was a change of perception, and then you could move ill health into positive health. And this is the whole thing about the New Age movement. Change the way you see things, change the way you look at who you are, change it into a more positive affirmation of well-being. This was central to the philosophy of the New Age. However warped it became, that was what it was based on. And Chiron has that as its principle. So we see, by looking at the historical period in which a planet was discovered, we understand so much more about its meaning. And we might want to give some thought about what it means to have discovered Eris recently in the times that we're enduring at the moment. And you can decide for yourself whether that bodes well or ill for humanity.